on their videos so that we just have interpreter and presenter open. And then, Sherry, are you good for recording?
We are recording.
Oh, alrighty then. I'm gonna go ahead. She can go ahead.
Right. Hello, everyone. I would like to say thank you to Jennifer Willis for having me here today, and thank you also to the interpreter, Melissa McMahon, for interpreting. So let's get ready for some excitement and some fun. We're talking about Deaf Culture 101 today. We're just going to get a taste of it. Some of you may have already had a sip of it, and some of you may be swimming in the ocean of deaf culture. So we're going to make this interesting for all kinds of people. All right. So before I get started, I'm going to talk a little bit about my background. I live and breathe deaf culture and have done so since I've been born. My family is deaf with the exception of one hearing sister. She is the only hearing child of deaf adults. So our parents are deaf, and there have been many language models in my life. And there have also been many cultural models in my life. You know, I just live as a normal person. I do realize that it is you all that are quote unquote normal and me that is quote unquote not normal, but it's all a matter of perspective. I graduated from the Maryland School for the Deaf. I went to Gallaudet. I got a graduate in deaf education. And then I went to Chicago. I lived in Chicago for 12 years. And that was when I had kind of a rude awakening. I realized that I was deaf, and maybe that wasn't a great thing. You know, I grew up in Maryland. Everyone knew what to do. In Chicago, they didn't, though. However, it was a good experience. I came back home. I have 4 kids, and my wife is hearing. I'm very proud of my culture. And there's one thing that I do want to share. It's not one size fits all. There is great diversity within the community. So I hope that you can sit back and enjoy the ride. Jennifer, go ahead and proceed to the next slide, please.
Doesn't it want to click? Oh, there we go.
Beautiful. So when you all see the word deaf, I want you to think about your initial thoughts. Jen, hold on 1 second. So what do you guys think when you see the word deaf? Be honest. Don't let me influence your thoughts. Go ahead and utilize the chat and let me know, what is the first thing you think of when you see the word deaf? Okay. Good. Maurice, good. Language diversity, impressive. Wow, you get points. Okay, who else? We've only got 1 so far. Oh, it's a quiet group, quiet audience. All right. Let me see here. Okay, I see 1. All right, I guess this is just a quiet audience. All right, I can deal with that. I can deal with that. Okay, so most often when hearing people see the word deaf, they think, oh, hold on. Okay, visual, that's a good one from Heather. Visual, very good. So as I was saying, a lot of people think, well, you can't hear. And that's true. You know, being deaf means you can't hear. So there's that. People think you use sign language. You use your hands to communicate. A lot of people think, oh, being deaf is different. You know, there are some people that think everyone that is deaf knows ASL. Sometimes they think, oh, it's hard for you to talk. Sometimes they think you use a hearing aid. Sometimes people are confused. Why don't you have a cochlear implant? Why don't all people have a cochlear implant? Sometimes people think, oh, you know, deaf people are incredibly expressive. Or sometimes they think, oh my goodness, sign language is so beautiful. It's like magic. So there's quite a perspective there. Now, what do I see? Jennifer, go ahead and click. There'll be a series of pictures that we see as you continue clicking. Keep on clicking. I see the captions here. I see Gallaudet University. I see diversity in the deaf community. I see poetry. I see vintage videos, basketball, deaf Olympics, deaf schools, ASL. My own family is there. There's more. Keep it coming. I see deaf people as technologically savvy, except for myself. I see an international deaf community. I see celebration of deaf culture. My daughter's right there. She's the one with the headband on. So happiness, celebration, unity, everyone is in this together. That's what I see. Next slide. I really want to emphasize that the deaf community is not one size fits all. We are incredibly diverse. We are diverse within our language, our signs, our level of speaking, being bilingual in different senses. For example, I am bilingual. I don't speak, but does that mean I'm less of a bilinguist? No. I'm bilingual through reading, writing, typing, signing. Some people can utilize 3 modes: reading, writing, speaking, listening, and signing. Some people are very strong, proficient English speakers, some not so much. Some can hear in one ear. Some people are deaf blind. There's a multitude of ethnicities. There's deaf families, hearing families, mainstream education, rural areas to take into consideration. Some people marrying hearing people, some people do not. So again, incredibly diverse. And I'm going to take this time to show you 3 video clips. I think these were taken about 3 years ago, and these are 3 different kinds of families. Jennifer, go ahead and click. You can start with anyone. You don't have to click anything else, just click within there. I do think that if you enlarge the video, that would be helpful, so that we're not just showing the clip. There you go, perfect. Okay.
Been together for 11 years. April and I have been married for 10 years. We have 6 children.
And of those 6 children, 4 are deaf, 2 are hearing, and 4 are adopted. We bought this land in hopes that there would always be a home for our children, and I wanted them to stay close enough to a community where there's a lot of deaf people.
Well, I wish that Joe didn't speak. I would rather he be deaf, just like I am, and so he could sign and be deaf just like the rest of the family. What do you think?
I want to become deaf.
So perfect. Go ahead and choose one of the others. It doesn't matter which one.
Why isn't it? I want to click. Oh, there we go. We got one.
Oh, I'm relieved. Okay.
When Shaylee was born, the results came back. She was deaf.
she passed the deaf test.
When Ivy was born, the nurse came in to let us know that Ivy had passed her hearing test, as if it should be this big celebration or something. And I was like, hello, we're deaf?
With Ivy, our family since then has been ASL all the way.
We had some people say, well, you're deaf and you're going to have a child? How are you going to take care of it? Or, oh no, your daughter's hearing but you're signing?
Some people said that it's child abuse. And that's where I'm like, hold up.
Think again, everybody.
That's a good one. Okay.
Mac! Michael! Michael! Help me. Help me. I love you.
My wife and children have some hearing. I was born deaf.
I have to call Michael to get his attention. Michael! At 17 years old, I went from being moderate deaf to profoundly deaf. I'm a little bit nervous today, so don't mind me. I'm like,
why are you so nervous?
because when I walk in, I don't know these people, and it's all hearing people, so sometimes I'm like, what did I get myself into? Will they understand me? Will I understand them? Will they be nice to me? Will they like me? Is the information important? Will I pass out? Will I poop in my pants?
Mom!
What will I do?
Mom!
I get really anxious.
Mom, don't worry. Just go with the flow. Pretend that you're with your friends. Those are your friends.
Yeah, I should do that.
Deaf world, hearing world. Yeah, there's a lot of worlds inside figuring out how to be deaf and stuff.
Okay. Nice job, Jennifer. You did well. Go ahead and advance to the next slide. Oh, this is
Well,
interpreter.
all right.
Everyone.
Stand by.
Nope. Oh yeah, that's good, right?
Yeah.
Whoops. Yes, that's good right there. Okay. All right. So what we just saw was a teaser. It was a trailer of the show called Deaf Out Loud. 3 different families are within there. The first one is of Hispanic ethnicity. And the woman that you saw is a coda, I think, if I'm remembering correctly, and her husband is deaf. Her children some are adopted, some are biological, and there's a mixture of both hearing and deafness. And it's interesting that the hearing brother was like, yeah, I wish I was deaf. So maybe that kid, feels a strong identification with deaf culture. Some codas do not have a strong correlation with deaf culture. It's really all about the identity. How does one self-identify? Same thing in deaf culture. I can't say that somebody is capital D deaf, which would be culturally deaf, versus lowercase d, which is medically deaf. And really, we're in this together. So we're focused on deafhood. It doesn't matter how deaf you are. It has nothing to do with hearing or the level of hearing. We're all in this together. So the second family that was featured talked about their experience at the hospital. That's very common. There was a deaf couple there. They're very proud of their ASL. And the nurse came in and said, oh, your daughter passed the test. Did the nurse even realize that she offended that deaf family? I don't think so. I think it's procedure. I think that needs to change. So when you say, oh, I passed or you passed, does that mean that somebody that doesn't pass is lesser than? I think we need to get rid of that way of thinking. I think we need to communicate your child can hear at this level, not necessarily the decibel hearing loss, just your child can hear at this level. That's more of a neutral message. Then you saw the third family there. Again, diversity. The wife lost her hearing over time. And honestly, my heart goes out to her. She has advantage. She has privilege. Yes, she can interact with hearing people. She's got job opportunities, but she has experienced loss. She had to transition to a new language, a new mode, and deal with this stigma. That's, wow, that's tough. The husband signs, he accepts and embraces his own identity and his wife's identity, as well as the children. You saw the family had a mixture as far as communication modes. They speak, they sign. Again, an example of diversity. Again, the third family, we later learned that they were open to cochlear implants. So we see more and more people are open, and there are a lot of technological interventions. Any questions so far? If not, I think we can advance to the next slide. Okay. So deaf media, go ahead and keep clicking. Good. Oh, go back one. There we go. So deaf in media. We see more today than we ever have. We saw one person and everyone in the deaf community was so excited. The entire deaf community would watch that one show with one deaf person that literally had a 5-second role. And we were like, yes, there's a deaf person on TV. Now you see deafness everywhere. You see it often. Often enough that I miss opportunities. Oh, really? There was a deaf person on TV? Man, I missed it. But that's great. We have to watch how the media is portraying deaf people, though. Sometimes we see something and somebody's standing very far away, and the deaf person is portrayed as if they can lip read for 2 or 3 miles, and they say to the FBI, well, this is what they said. That's not realistic. Or if a person is pursuing you and you just suddenly turn, how would you know? It's not that I have a superpower or, I'm so lonely, like checking in on the interpreter. The heart is a lonely hunter. That's Elena Harkin, and she won an Academy Award for that role. And I saw that and I was just like, oh my goodness. Was a hearing actress. Back then that was okay, but today it is not politically correct. And so the actress fingerspelled a lot, signed very little, was very lonely, isolated, tried to have a connection with people. Hearing people kind of ostracized her. I think it was from the 1960s, 1968. And then in the end, the character ended up killing himself. So when I look at that, I think, I don't agree with that. The deaf community is very cohesive. We love to chat. We're very social beings. So again, there was a stigma there. A great show, however, is called Switched at Birth. There's a lot of cultural information in there. There's deaf actors and actresses. There are people that have experienced hearing loss over time. Everything that I'm discussing here is discussed in that show. So if you're curious, I think that would be a great place for you to turn. And I think it started about 8 to 10 years ago and then really developed quite a following. So I'm going to jump around here a little bit. The last movie was called A Quiet Place. I think it was about 3 years ago that it came out. And there's a deaf actor, like true to life deaf person, 13 years old, I believe. Interesting how the deaf community reacted, however, because a lot of times when the deaf community would see a cochlear implant, that would cause a ruckus. So this deaf actress, her parents were very supportive, and they didn't think cochlear implant or ASL. They said, you know what, why not embrace both? So the deaf community supported that. The plot itself is interesting. In the end, the cochlear implant essentially saves the family, even though ASL keeps them alive. So you could see it as ASL working against the cochlear implant or working together. So all a matter of perspective again. Next slide. Okay, perfect. I'll let you take a moment and read the slide. Okay. The American deaf community it's called a low incidence disability, deafness. So when hearing people have a deaf child, they're scared. They may have never met a deaf person before. And they think, you know, talking is what I do to connect to people. My communication, my personality, my thoughts, all of that is shared through spoken language. So 1 in 1,000 babies is deaf. Now, to add to that, 93% of deaf babies are born into hearing families. A lot of people have the assumption of about 70% are born into deaf families. I wish it was. And I don't say that to be offensive to anybody. I say that because I think we would see a decline in language deprivation, whether it's intentional or unintentional. Many families do not sign. I would say perhaps about 20%. And that's a guess. I could be wrong, but I would say about 20% of hearing families sign fluently. Some hearing families may sign a little bit, they may fingerspell, but unfortunately that results in language deprivation. 28 million deaf and hard of hearing people are in the world. There's about 330 million people, 330 million Americans right now, maybe 328. And so this 28 million people includes the senior community, you know, that are losing their hearing, and they're saying, what? Hello? I said, what do you want for dinner? So when we're talking about the number of profoundly deaf, proficient ASL users, we don't know. Some people say maybe 500,000. That is a very small percentage. That doesn't include codas, interpreters, teachers of the deaf. If you include that, I would say maybe 1 million, don't quote me. But we need exact numbers. We need a census. I think that in our census, we need to include, do you speak ASL? And we don't. Continuing on. Through my travels to various countries, I realize how fortunate we are here in America. We have a lot of protection and opportunities for jobs. People do still struggle, but the struggle is nothing compared to other countries. We have the ADA, and the ADA has 4 titles. I'm not going to get into the weeds there, but the ADA is how many of us get interpreters. There is no, well, but, no, the ADA says you have to provide interpreters. We do still struggle with some medical facilities, some doctors. It's best to go to a hospital or clinic. Typically, you'll have interpreter services there. It's private practice where we still struggle. The Rehabilitation Act of 1973, wow. I don't know exactly what it did, but it cleaned up a lot for us. It has something to do with colleges. Sometimes I think that Title III of the ADA and the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 overlap. We also have vocational rehabilitation that helps people go to college, get training, get jobs, the list goes on. So we really get a lot of perks for being deaf. Next slide. Okay. I just noticed that some of the participants are from all over. So I'm not going to get into the weeds here. But as far as the number of deaf people that we see, let's say you go to, maybe Polish or Protestant, Italians, Hispanic communities, Black individuals, you can see them concentrated throughout the United States, Chicago, New York, Harlem. That's not necessarily the case with deafness. We don't go from generation to generation like other cultures. Sometimes we have hearing kids or we've got hearing parents. So we're connected with other people in a different way. Where you're going to see a large deaf community is going to be based on the centralized location of a deaf school. People are bringing their kids there, they're moving to the area, they've got job opportunity, there are business developments that you see that hire deaf people, and there just so happens to be a large deaf population in Frederick, Maryland. There's a debate between us and Rochester and then Fremont, California. So Northern California, but I think the 3 locations have the largest deaf community and population. Next slide. Hey. Hello, Savannah. Okay. So if the interpreter needs time to get a drink, I will let them do so. All right, the interpreter says she's good. Okay. So culture, how do you define culture? Some people say deaf culture. What? Culture? You think of a wheelchair and you think of culture. So Black culture, Hispanic culture, Latino culture, deaf people are redefining culture. To put it simply, it's a way of life. It's how we live. It's how we think. Our identity, our values, our norms, rules for behavior, and language that hold us all together. ASL is a vital part of that. What is the specific definition? Don't worry about that. It's informal. Just take a look at the slide. Oh, ouch. Okay. So how we interact, how we think, relationships, rules of behavior. There are some unspoken aspects too, like the light flashing. I know when it's an emergency. My kids will flash the lights very fast and I'll be like, what? It's an emergency. They don't have to come and wave at me. They can flash the lights. If they flash the light once or twice, maybe dinner's ready. If they flash the light 3 or 4 times, they're like, come on, this is the second warning. If the light goes off and then comes back on, they're teasing me. And I'm like, what are you doing? And they're like, ha, ha, ha. So even a light switch has rules. There's like 50 different light patterns. It's like Morse code. So that's just one example. We have a long history. Oh, hold on, go back. Are you trying to get me moving along faster? Okay, thank you. Oh, stop. Okay. So we value deaf people historically that aren't even related to us. We own them, essentially. People from, oh goodness, during Aristotle's time. During that time, the view was that deaf people couldn't reason. Oh, hold on, I'm messing it up. I own that. Deaf people can't hear, therefore they can't reason. So they were saying we couldn't think. Now, again, that's a historical reference. People in that time didn't have active communication. If there was a community, you might have one deaf person. They were very isolated. When they met another deaf person, they had gestures. They created a communication system. Eventually, that communication and gestural system included more people, included schools, and that system eventually evolved into a language. It's very fascinating. Stories, we've got so many, deaf history, we've got jokes, poetry, literature, books, magazines, videos. It continues. Next slide. Jen, are you there? Hello? Ah, there it is. Okay. Identity, how we identify, that's huge. Sometimes people, I'll see somebody on the phone and it's somebody that has signed with me our whole lives. And I'll be like, I didn't know you spoke on the phone. And they're like, yeah, you know, I'm deaf. But the fact I'm deaf doesn't mean how much you hear. It's what's in your heart. How do you identify? Same thing with Black people. You know, saying you're Black, does that refer to the color of your skin only? No. So conceptually, you can understand the similarities. A light-skinned person may identify as Black, biracial, multiracial. It's a culture. Same thing applies within the deaf community. We value our hands and our eyes. For example, my mom has glaucoma. My family was very concerned, you know, because we communicate through our eyes. So there's a lot of value placed on the eyes and hands. Physical contact, you know, deaf people have to hug. If we talk 10 or 15 minutes, we have to hug. And then that hug is a signal for the final departure. Well, we might do it one more time. Our goodbyes, our see you laters take forever because we don't see deaf people everywhere. And we cherish that time together, even more so with the effect of the pandemic. Next slide. So I have talked about this, the long goodbyes, attention getting, calling someone, name signs, that's a good one. So name signs are very important. There are rules associated with name signs, like letters. Typically, that's an arbitrary. So my name sign is Edna, E on the chest. Does that say anything about me and my personality? No, it's just an E on my chest. My mom gave me that name sign, and that's fine. And then there are also iconic name signs based on a personality. If you love earrings, your eyes, it doesn't matter. It could be anything. Some people combine the two. That seems to be a newer trend. I didn't see that so much before. It was kind of viewed as breaking the rule. It seemed to be maybe within the interpreting community or mainstream community, but I can see it being accepted. So name signs are incredibly interesting. It's a very interesting topic. And name signs I call ASL names. You know, my English name spelled out EDNA, my name sign or my ASL sign is E on the chest. Short names, you can just spell it out, Bob, B-O-B. Next slide. Oh, let me check on the questions. Hellos. Okay. Okay. The deaf community has an avid sports community within. We're very active in sports. We enjoy physical contact. We enjoy the banter. My school's better than yours. We enjoy making new partners, seeing them at clubs, at deaf events, deaf picnics. Deaf organizations, you know, when we come together, we enjoy playing sports. Churches also, we are now, with globalization, we're seeing more deaf partners and alliances and collaborations. We're communicating through FaceTime. We're communicating through a plethora of apps. We're communicating on Zoom. So we're becoming a more global community. Next slide. Okay, what slide am I on now? All right. Jennifer, what slide am I on now?
13.
13. Oh, okay. All right, I've got so much more. All right, ASL itself is a language. Yes, it's a different mode, but that doesn't mean that it's less of a language. You know, as a deaf community, we are constantly challenging society in how language is defined, how a disability is defined, how culture is defined. You know, does culture have to be based on one's skin? No, there's so much diversity within culture. Language, how is that defined? There are some English mouth movements intermixed in our ASL. If you look at Wikipedia, I know it's not a great source, but if you look at it, you will see that language does not mean it's from the tongue. But it's like Latin or Roman, Greek, I don't even know. But it means tongue, coming from the tongue. But we're seeing it doesn't. It comes from the hands, the face, the forehead, the eyebrows. You see different types. When I raise my eyebrows, it's a yes or no question. There's also rhetorical questions that you can see on the eyebrows. There's declarative statements. And you see my nose, my lips, my cheeks. My face does so much. There's so much grammar on my face. We have a vertical grammar system, if you will, whereas speaking is very linear. There are 5 parameters that are discussed here. ASL has 5 parameters, as I've mentioned. I'm sure some of you know these. Hand shapes. If you're talking about an airplane, that's the I love you hand shape. You can't just have a flat palm. It has to be the I love you hand shape. That's the proper way. Location. It's in the air. You know, I couldn't say airplane here on my head. That would be incorrect unless it was just a little toy. Maybe that would be okay. So it has to be elevated in the air. The movement, you know, what is the plane doing? Is it crashing? Is it taking off? Is it experiencing turbulence? You can see all of that in the hand itself. So typically when you see the double motion, it means it's a noun. Now look at my mouth. You see an action on there and there's a verb. Stop talking to me, please. My son is there. Please, I'm in a workshop right now. Please. Oh my goodness. Let's see, we've talked about, okay. Palm orientation. Imagine. Okay, you see this? It's supposed to be a smiley face. So now the palm, how is it oriented? It's looking down here, if you will. So in an airplane, your palm orientation is down. If you were trying to sign airplane with an upward palm orientation, it would be incorrect. So there are rules within the 5 parameters. The 5th one is non-manual markers. It's not on the hands. It's what you see on the face. And what you see on the face does potentially change the sign that I'm showing you with my hand. Okay? I do want to talk very quickly about the concept of being universal. A lot of people assume that ASL is universal. It is not. I think 120, 130 perhaps is the number for known forms of signed language. So if an international person approaches me, quite often we can use an advanced communication system. We can gesture. Oftentimes we have the same eye language, if you will. Role shifting is very similar, and we can communicate very effectively and quickly. Hearing people that go into an international location will typically speak into their phone and use some type of translation app to communicate. Deaf people don't have to rely on that. Next slide. Okay, slide 14. So I've already discussed some of this, but there are different kinds of bilingualism within the deaf community. Different kinds of bilinguals, I think, is what I'd prefer to say. So high ASL, no English, means monolingual. That's fine. That's good. There's a very strong language base there. You know, they can think, they can articulate, they can share their requests, thoughts. It may be difficult with a hearing person, therefore an interpreter would be needed, an interpreter that is qualified with monolinguals. So there's one strong language base there. The next thing we see is ASL dominant bilingual, means they can read and write just fine. Thinking, you know, where are they comfortable? They're comfortable thinking in ASL. And that's where a lot of deaf people are. High ASL, lower English. Moving on, balanced bilingual. Honestly, I feel that it's a myth that there's a balanced bilingual. Just, you know, being very honest with you, I know people think that I'm high ASL, high English, but when I do a self-analysis, ASL does hold some superiority over my English. I do identify some errors in my English. I have some deaf-isms, some idioms. My goal is to be a balanced bilingual, you know, and I have to work very hard towards making my English balanced. I think there are a lot of people that experience balanced bilingual, that are balanced bilinguals. I just think there are less in the deaf community. So looking at semilingual, double semilingual, people that kind of flip back and forth between ASL and English. However, it's low ASL, low English. They have a hard time making sense of signs and written and spoken words. Oftentimes, somebody that knows this person very well can help facilitate communication needs. And oftentimes that's a result of other learning disabilities, disabilities, or language deprivation. So low ASL, high English. Remember the third family we saw? And the lady said, oh, you know, I might poop in my pants. And her son's like, it's going to be okay. Just imagine that they're your friends. She is low ASL, although she signs very well. You know, her spoken English, she reads and writes very well as speaks very well. Deaf people who speak very well, like the daughter, you know, and the mother's like, you know, what if I poop in my pants? And the daughter's like, Mom, she's deaf, but she spoke very well. Again, diversity. Let me see if there's any other questions here. Okay, next. All right. So I want to really place an emphasis on this. My view of how to define deaf community members. I think the old-fashioned approach is the black and white picture. So there are 4 avenues, if you will. audiologists. So, you know, based on the hearing level. Then we've got deaf, you know, I mean, that's me, you know, I could hear maybe an airplane landing or something. If somebody bangs on the table, I'm going to feel that. So I'm very deaf. So the more deaf I am, if you will, the more I transition to the middle. Jen, would you mind highlighting the core with your cursor? Perfect. Thank you. Yes, stay right there. Stay right there. That's perfect. Go up. Move your cursor up, up, up. Yep. Okay. Oh, down just a smidge. Down, 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 down to the triangle. Okay, stay there. Perfect. Okay. Now, looking at the social circle, you know, deaf people that interact with deaf people, go to church, organizations, deaf schools, deaf bingo night, whatever the case may be, you know, incredibly social. They don't stay home in isolation. They develop their identity. They're very proud of that identity. You know, as opposed to somebody that says, that is outside of that social circle in the white area. You know, if you're involved in everything deaf, FaceTime, all of the deaf isms, if you will, is closer to the middle. So Jen, if you move the cursor to the middle, good job there. That's what I'm referring to. So then when we look at the bottom circle, linguistic, we're talking about an attitude. You know, is ASL just a tool, or do you cherish ASL? And then also your level of competency and fluency in ASL. Jen, you're on it. You're doing great. Okay. If you're signing, you know, the less you sign, the more into the white space you go. Now, the political circle, I don't necessarily agree with. So, you know, I used to think of deaf protesters. That's not necessarily the case. Maybe somebody is involved with the National Association for the Deaf. Social media can be, you know, a political stance if you speak out, or if you're talking about a media, a movie, or Coco dying. You know, it was a hearing gorilla that had learned some sign language. The New York Times said, you know, Coco, who knew ASL, died. And many deaf people sent articles saying, Coco knew ASL? No. I mean, Coco knew 300 signs. Don't get me wrong, it's pretty good, but 300 to 400 signs is not equivalent to knowing ASL. That made ASL look lesser than. So that's a political movement. There were supporters and lobbyists. And again, that level of involvement moves you closer to the middle. So Jen, if you could move right into the middle, perfect. And that's kind of the old way of thinking. All right, so now let's look at the colorful map. Go ahead and take a moment to take a look at that. Okay. So this is intersectionality. So within the deaf community, it's not just deaf. There are different ethnicities, religions, LGBTQ, different socioeconomical statuses, jobs, white collar, blue collar, parents that are deaf, parents that are hearing, spouses that are deaf, hearing, children that are deaf versus hearing. You know, your way of thinking. You know, I'm an activist within the deaf community. I'm very proud to be deaf. Doesn't mean I have to be political. Communication skills, work, thinking, education, parents, right. Parents are very important in this. You know, my parents are considered deaf elite, but I didn't feel that way. You know, I mean, my family's earnings were small, and we love everyone. You know, we have hearing people in our family that we love. I think my family might be a little bit different. And as I mentioned, you know, I have a hearing sister, so I've always cherished and valued hearing people as well. So where am I? I'm very privileged to live in Maryland. I was born and raised in Maryland. I had so many language models, teachers, hearing, deaf, many from Gallaudet. So great geographically, again, very privileged. Money, right, Jewish, Catholic. Some people had hearing parents that sign very well. They celebrate their child's deafness and they think, you know what, I'm good. They're not upset. They're not grieving like, oh my goodness, why and how did I have this deaf child? Race, right. So there's so much in this intersectionality. Right now, I'm presenting, you know, I'm a female, I'm a woman, I'm deaf, I'm LGBTQ, I'm a lesbian, I'm an adoptive mom, I've got 4 children, I'm an ally, I support the Black community, I support Ethiopia, my children are from Ethiopia, and that doesn't always define me. There are like 100 parts to me, just as there are with all of you. Some of those parts are larger than others. Some of those parts vary based on the situation. And I think that this is a more holistic view. This feels right. The other view that we looked at makes me think of a deafer than thou, and I have a hard time appreciating that. You know, interpreters, deaf families, hearing people in deaf families, everyone is valued and appreciated. Next
there is
slide.
a question.
Questions so far?
Yes. Is political
Okay.
more about changing the laws?
Honestly, I never really understood that. I think it's more of supporting the goals of the deaf community. So it's support. Now, how do you show that support? That could be, you know, the deaf community wants equality in employers and in employment opportunities, jobs, education, language as a human right. So many deaf people are language deprived, and that impacts your entire life. So I think how we support, how do we make an effort? What do we do? What are our efforts? Are they on the state level, a federal level? Is it within our local schools and communities? I think how you support the community's goals. I honestly do not understand 100%, and I've yet to find that perfect answer. But great question. Other questions? I can do a few more before I continue. No? Okay. So go ahead and feel free to ask questions during the presentation. I enjoy answering those. This was from another workshop. Let's see here. Okay. So the language of power. I think it's important, you know, how do you use words? How do you view words? Sometimes you have to reframe how you view the deaf community. The deaf community as disabled? No, we're deaf. We're proud of that. We're linguistic minority community. That's it. You know, we don't want to be viewed as, oh, it's a deaf person. They can't hear. Hey, hey, can you hear me? No, it's fine. Get over it. I'm deaf. Okay, moving on. And how you use your words. So the power of language. Language is incredibly powerful. Next slide. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead and read those. I think we're running out of time, so I'm not going to review those, but take a moment to read. If you have a question, though, please feel free to type that in the chat. Okay. So for me, I'm used to using an interpreter. Like right now, we have an interpreter. You know, I accept it. It's not like oh, she can't talk for herself. Yeah, it might not be easy, but so what? Same thing with Spanish speaking individuals or people that speak French. We all have the same challenges. It's not because I can't talk. It's because I use ASL and you don't know how to sign, and that's okay. The interpreter is not for me. The interpreter is for both of us. You that are ASL impaired, you can't sign, and I don't talk. So the interpreter is for both of us. It's how you view it. And I'm used to that loss of privacy. We have to trust that interpreters are not going to share my private information. And that's difficult. It's tough for hearing people to open up. They think, oh, that's a really private situation, but we accept it. Oftentimes, there's stigma. And I think number 10 is very important. I have grieved. I continue to grieve. There are so many deaf schools that are closing their doors, and mainstream programs are being widespread. A lot of them offer good options, but it's not the best option. If a deaf student wants to maybe take some elective courses or some more challenging courses, that might be a great option for them. If somebody is looking for, a great social environment and to really thrive socially, a mainstream program may not be the best benefit. It may be that a deaf school is better. Electives are often limited within deaf schools because of resources. With so many deaf schools closing their doors, I think about 90 to 95% of deaf kids in America and throughout the world are mainstreamed. Only 5% of kids are in deaf schools. That's scary. What about our future? We're handing the torch to this new generation, and where are they going? You think about ASL. Are less and less people using ASL? So I'm very thankful for the IDEA law, Individuals with Disabilities Educational Act from 1975. I keep on going. Okay, next slide.
There's a question.
Okay.
Do you have a sense of how LSM and other languages fit into the majority American deaf culture?
It's a big role. Yeah, of course. So I want to make sure I'm clear. LSM, yeah, absolutely. Just like, we've got America, not everybody speaks English, right? I mean, in America, there's a multitude of languages. If you look at languages spoken in America, there's probably, 60 million people that speak Spanish. I don't know, I'm making these numbers up, but LSM, certainly. I don't know enough, but when we meet some people, I know that there are people that are familiar with LSM. They know a lot of languages. Reading and writing, maybe not the case unless they're learning in America. They may be able to have that Hispanic language. Maybe they speak Spanish, LSM, they sign, they can read and write in English and Spanish. I'm seeing more and more workshops. I'm seeing more and more deaf educators with ethnic and diverse backgrounds that are teaching and celebrating. One that comes to mind is the Council de Manos, and they have been doing so many workshops. I don't know enough. LSM is certainly valued. I want to say that the region is probably southwestern, maybe Texas, that area, but not so many here in Maryland. I hope that addresses your question. Are we good? Okay. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay, so I'm trying to be mindful of our time. So it's very important how we view diversity. So the norm is a white hearing man. But is it? Who said that? America is incredibly diverse. It's the most diverse place in the world. It's beautiful. Diversity is an asset. It's not a liability. We just have to learn different perspectives. We have to work together in forward motion. In the deaf community, we're unique in so many different ways. I mean, we're breaking all the rules, and I think that's cool. When people view us, we offer richness to every position, every place, every person that we're involved in. Our language, our culture is diverse. We're in this together. It's how you think and how you view things that needs to change. Take a moment to view the comics and read over those. This is perfect. So words in English, in ASL, people think have equal translation. So the word for sign translation is equivalent, and it's not. So if you say, this is a cup on the table, in English, word for word, I would, in ASL, I would sign table first. I would not say, I have a cup there on the table. I would say table, here's the table, and here's the cup, because the table is the ground. I have to establish that focal point. So here's the table, and then I explain that there's a cup on the table. But you English speakers would say there is a cup on the table. So we translate sentences all the time. Same thing happens in Spanish, same thing happens in French. ASL is incredibly rich. The classifiers, it's a 3D language. It's beautiful. Okay, next slide. We don't have time for videos. Nope, let's skip that. You can view those later on your own time. Next slide, please. Yeah. You know, I mean, this is what we deal with. You can just take a look at them. Go ahead and keep on clicking. Keep the slide up. Just show all of the items, please. Okay, is that it? Oh, I think there's one more. Perfect, right there. So how deaf people respond to hearing people. And I just want to preface, a lot of hearing people are cool, right? They meet us, they want to learn sign language. It's not that hearing people are bad. Hearing people sometimes are very awkward. You know, sometimes they'll want to sign, and sometimes you see someone that comes up to you like this, and they're like, you know, thrilled to see that I recognize them practicing their signs. And when I wave to them, they're like, H-I, and they're like, I know just a little bit, I'm so sorry. And that's fine. I've had a couple awful experiences, but, you know, not to the point where I'm like, oh my gosh, I hate hearing people. That's not the case. So many of them are cool. Now, you see that a lot of this is negative. And, you know, when I meet hearing people, this is what they say. You know, I'm shocked. Oh my goodness, what? And my response, so fast food, for example, I do still do this. So I'll walk up to the counter and I'll kind of point to my ears. It's kind of like an apology for being deaf. Now I try not to. I try to wave and I sign. And I will gesture such as this. The person that sees me looks scared and they're like, shit. And they'll be like, I don't sign. And they're like, manager, she's deaf. Or some people will say I can sign just a little bit. So you know, the role is reversed and they're apologizing for not knowing how to sign, or they're so excited that we're going to play charades, or they're incredibly stressed because there's people behind me, the line is growing, and they feel stressed. And that's exactly how we feel. But we don't want to deflate that person's sense of self-worth. I want it to be understood that the accountability is on both of us, not just on me. And the reaction from hearing people is reframed. So we just have to work together. Next slide. Okay. I recommend that you do not use the words at the top of the slide. The culturally appropriate phrases and words are at the bottom of the slide. Take a moment to review. Okay. All right. So I'm guilty of this as well, but they'll be like, you know that deaf woman? It's a label. I encourage you to try to remember my name. You remember Edna, that woman with the awful name? I prefer that. I know my name's awful. It's cool. I accept it. You know, people think I'm like 90. It's fine. But I prefer that than for you to say, oh, that deaf woman. It's just like identifying someone by color. Oh, that Black person, or that Spanish, Hispanic, Latina, Latinx person. It's not politically correct. Identify them by who they are. You know, that person with the red shirt and the blue pants. Use words such as ASL English interpreter. I think that helps recognize that there are two languages. Deaf people typically are bilinguals. We are at an advantage because most hearing people are monolinguals. ASL, not sign language. Sign language is a mode of communication. Sign language, which sign language? Italian sign language, Ethiopian sign language, speech. Oh, English language. Sign language is a mode, ASL is a language. Okay, next slide, I'm almost done. Are there any questions? Let's see. Okay. So in today's society, we have the BLM movement. You know, good, right? We're waking up. We're not just going through our daily routines. We all have privileges, and we have to use them in the right way. We have to level the playing field. We have to be accountable for our own actions. We are all racist, period. We all benefit from this system, from racism. It's the same thing with deafness, you know, autism as well. You know, we're privileged based on our hearing status. I'm deaf, yes, but I have privilege too. I had language from birth. I became capable of doing many different things. So yes, I am privileged. What do I do with that privilege? Use it well. We all need to recognize your privilege and use it well. Talk about it. Don't avoid it. Don't suppress it. The more you talk about it, the better it's going to be, the more open you are. Deaf people appreciate that openness if you mean well. You know, some people say, can I ask you a stupid question? And deaf people were like, yeah, absolutely. I enjoy dumb questions. Like when a hearing person says, can you drive? And I'm like, really? Hearing people are worse drivers. I mean, not now because everyone's using their phones, but you know, having friends who are deaf. I have children that are from Ethiopia. It's important that my children have Black role models, language models, Ethiopian culture, hearing families with deaf children. For example, Heather Beck, who is here now, I admire her. She signs, and her son has beautiful ASL. They do everything to support their son's deaf identity, and that's exactly what we should be. You have to step back. You have to support the community. We have to understand the goals and say, hey, you know what? I'm here if you need me, rather than stepping up and saying I'm Superman. Next slide. Okay. Oh, next slide. We'll skip that. Perfect. Okay. So from here on out, you're going to see so many resources. You can go to the websites, you can go to the apps, you can watch the shows on TV, on Netflix, Facebook. Oh my goodness, there are so many different groups. Some are closed, some are open, and that's how you can learn so much more. Your local interpreting programs often have libraries within. So go ahead and click through those slides, please. Let me just highlight a couple. I really strongly recommend ASDC, the American Society for Deaf Children. So many good resources there. They're very concise, to the point. There are links to other landing pages for families with deaf children. You can go ahead and open that. I also mentioned the Council de Manos. That is Hispanic. And Maurice, you had mentioned LSM. I really encourage you check out their website. There are a lot of free webinars, free, from the Clare Center. Let's see here, the fourth item there on the list. And they're free, so many free, either live or recorded webinars that you can take advantage of. Okay, go ahead, advance. Oh, hold on, go back, I'm sorry. Okay. The National Black Deaf Advocates, Nbda, also another great organization on a national level. Check it out. And one more here, the VL2, Visual Language and Learning. That's sponsored by the National Science Foundation. There's a lot of money that has been devoted to researching signs, gestures, and even with hearing people who use gestures. There's a lot of research of how that supports brain development, and deaf children who are 0 to 5, if they don't have any visual communication or stimulation, how does that affect their language, their emotions? There's a lot of great resources there, that last link. And again, it's free. Next slide. Okay. You guys can check these out. Next slide. I love this video. It's the 3 little pigs. The woman, her name is Ruth Red, and her ASL is great. Her emotions, what you see on her face, the grammar, it's fantastic. And she really uses technology to support the ASL. A lot of older traditional backgrounds, it's just a plain background with a person signing. In her videos, you see the sun coming up while she's signing. It's a 5-minute story, but I encourage you check it out on your time. Next slide. Again, magazines, anybody that wants to practice ASL. I really enjoy Joseph Wheeler. He's made a lot of videos. He's an ASL teacher, and his videos are about 5-10 minutes. He's even got some shorter 2 to 3 minute clips. Anything you can think of, check out Joseph Wheeler. Another good resource is LifePrint. And again, all of these are free. LifePrint has videos and a website. If, let's see, if you think of a word, culture, for example. So it will have A to Z, you will click on C, and then there's a list of words that start with C, you click on culture, and then this guy will sign for 3 seconds, culture. So instead of you know, seeing something printed, it is 3D, it is movement, it's more precise. Next slide. Okay, we're done. I'm open to your questions. I hope you enjoyed getting a taste of the deaf community and deaf culture. Any questions? Oh, not gonna look at that. Oh, okay, I am looking. I'm watching. I'm happy to share the PowerPoint. I'm more than willing to do that. So the PowerPoint, I'll share it with you, but I ask that you don't continue to share it out because I do give credit to other people's work that I include. But if you continue to share it out, then it becomes illegal. And also, I would like to continue doing this workshop and this presentation. So if you continue to share it, you know, I miss out. I'm happy to share a PDF, or I'll talk to Jen. I'll either share a PDF or the actual PowerPoint, and I'm happy if you want to share it with your family, but thank you so much for asking. Okay. All right. Yeah, I will. I'm done. We're just doing questions now. Okay. Okay, I'm going to make a note to include the PowerPoint. Okay. All right. Sure thing. Hello.
Thank you, Edna, so very much.
Sure thing. And thank you. Bye, everyone. Should I leave? I don't know. I feel kind of awkward.
Oh, I'm coming. Here we go.
Interpreter, nice job. Thank you. Can you move the poll? It's like right in my face. Oh, I'm a participant. Okay, hold on.
Oh. Bridget, yes, if you send me your email, I can send out a certificate. Multitasking. Okay, yes. Sherry, you can stop recording. I lost Sherry.